Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, 4 nerds by nerds. Hang out with these nerds.
Nathan Nerdarch.
Nerdarchy's Ted.
And today we have a Game Master's tip for you, the basics of building a dungeon. Hey guys, you may have noticed these awesome gaming shirts we're wearing from ArmorClass10.com, Nerdarchy's newest sponsor. You can find the link in the description below to get your cool gaming shirt
At ArmorClass10.com.
which is sponsoring this video where we'll be talking about dungeon design.
So there's several things that you need to make sure you consider when you're designing the typical dungeon. You want to look at layout. You want to look at the encounters you're putting in there. And of course, it's a dungeon. You got to have traps.
Well, you don't have to, because not all dungeons are actually dungeons. When I'm designing my dungeons, the first thing I probably think about is my theme, right? Like every dungeon kind of has a theme to it, and you want to kind of flavor everything with that. And how is that going to work out? Now, if you're going with more of your classic dungeon, where it's like Indiana Jones style, which would have like more traps like that you're talking about, then you also have to figure out, well, how are my monsters getting around? What monsters can I use in that dungeon?
Yeah, the monster ecology of the place.
Right. So that's why. So for that very reason, a lot of times like undead and constructs work really well. Plus, they're things that don't have natural. They're actually not part of a natural ecology, so you don't have to take that into consideration. Like in the old school days, you like kick in a door. There's 6 orcs sitting there playing cards. You murder them. You take your stuff. You go to the next room, and there's like a troll hanging out with a bugbear. And you're like, why are these guys here? What are they doing? How come they don't fight with the orcs down the hallway? But later on in gaming, things evolved a little bit. Dungeon magazine, Dragon magazines were coming out, and people started saying, well, this doesn't really make sense. Why are these guys all in the same spot? What are they doing here?
It's great for a hack and slasher,
Well,
but when you wanted to talk about Dungeons and Dragons in more of an RP sense, they don't make sense.
They were clearly hired to stay in place by the
Wizard.
By the Mad Wizard, and he paid them with the gold and the loot that they had in their rooms to sit there and wait for adventurers.
Actually, everything's rank controlled, so they try and get along with their neighbors because they don't want to lose their spot.
Yeah.
So one of the things I like to look at when I'm doing dungeon design is, like they've said, a theme, but kind of the who, what, where. So who built it and what was it built for originally, and that could be the people that are currently occupying it had built it, or
they're using it for the thing that it was built for.
Yes, oh, I built this house and I'm living in it. Right. But 1,000 years later, you're not living in that house anymore, unless you're a lich or something, or one of the zombie occupants, and the purpose might be repurposed if it's still usable.
Like a good example from popular media for a dungeon would be Lord of the Rings, The Mines of Moria, right? It's no longer being used for its original purpose. The original inhabitants have been cleared out. And not only that, you do have kind of like this weird ecology going on where there's a bunch of orcs and goblins living in there. I don't remember if it was orcs and goblins, but it was one or the other or both, right? They're all living in there. They're all hanging out. Well, you also had the weird monster, in the lake outside. This is very D&D-esque. Mm-hmm. And, they had the rock troll in there, but, it worked out. Like, the rock troll is themed towards working with these bad guys, so that kind of works out. And there was also some instances, too, where, like, the hobbits are messing around with stuff by a well or something? Mm-hmm. And Gandalf's like, well, stop messing with stuff. You're just going to get us beat up basically down here if you keep messing with that, because who knows what lives in that well now. And I think that was like the vibe that I was getting off of Gandalf. Mm-hmm.
And then of course they've got a Balrog.
Oh yeah, and that's the other thing. There's also a Balrog in there as well. So
and the ecology with the Balrog is when it shows up, everything else is not there. It's run away someplace, hidden somewhere else on some other level that the Balrog can't easily get to.
Yes, so like that is like one of the best examples I can think of from pop culture, right? And the other one being like Indiana Jones movies were like full of them. Like each one of them had a dungeon and mega dungeon in it, even if it's not really recognizable. Like even the chase scenes on the rail cars in Temple of Doom, I think.
Yes.
Is an awesome scene for you to insert right into your Dungeons and Dragons game. that could definitely be in there. And what do you need to make that happen? An old mine, an old
Yeah.
dwarven mine that's been abandoned.
Oh, wait a second. Dwarven mine right outside a Dwarven castle or a Dwarven stronghold.
Yeah, right for the temple.
Go right from one to the other.
Yeah.
Could absolutely, or you could combine the two, right? New temple constructed for dark god or whatever. After they had already kind of evicted the dwarves, or the dwarves have long since moved on, so you could literally go from like one dungeon to the next. And let's face it, when we say dungeon, we loosely use that term because pretty much anything could be a dungeon.
Yeah, I would say a contained adventure where once you get into the area, you're probably going to play around in it a bit and have to deal with the denizens of it and the traps and all the other hazards of it before you leave.
Yeah, like the biggest defining factors are there's a set amount of ways that you can go when you're in a dungeon. You can't go in any direction. Right. The paths are kind of defined for you, and some are more hazardous than others. And you could place that into like a twisted enchanted forest. It could literally be a labyrinth. Yeah. It could literally be a dungeon, right? Someone's basically jail that they have underground, and it's vast.
Yeah, or if a castle has been long destroyed by siege and trebuchet.
Could be catacombs. Could be a long abandoned or conquered temple, or same with a stronghold.
Perhaps it's the insides of a monster in a space asteroid.
Could be the inside of a monster in a space asteroid.
Yes, it could very
well. Star Wars, or Dave's Spelljammer game where you rip that idea off.
Yes.
So there's definitely tons of ways to incorporate dungeons into it. So, what about you? What are some of the key things that you do when you think about design?
When I look at it, again, I also look at theme, and I try to follow the more modern standpoint of making sure that whatever is there for a reason. I do try to make sure that I'm adding something new that the party hasn't seen before, whether it be a new trap, a new monster, possibly a new mechanic. When I designed the lair of the Beholder, I brought in the element of three-dimensional combat, which became interesting because it's not only like the X and Y axis, but you had to also look at your Z, because that changes how you maneuver in combat. So that's going to add that much more impact to the design of it.
Yeah, we literally had to come up with the ability to fly for that battle, pretty much. Which was kind of like ingeniously done through David's character, but Kurt had the idea of, hey, just summon some pixies and they can all cast fly on us. Mm-hmm. Although there were some downsides to that.
Yeah, if anything happened to David's character, it was a long way down.
Which did eventually happen towards the end of the battle, and the concentration was lost, and so it became this new hazard. Like we had to worry about falling. Mm-hmm. And, fortunately, like my character had feather fall because he knew that he was going into this dungeon. And it's not a spell he memorizes all the time, but he was prepared for this time anyways.
Yeah, 3D dungeon with a lot of falls.
But when you're looking at, the design of a dungeon, the players are going to take that into effect as well as denoted by you guys and saying, okay, well, if your opponent flies, do I have to worry about flying or falling?
Well, you kind of do if you want to get in melee range with them.
Yeah.
And they're shooting I-beams at you. So, yeah, that becomes definitely a thing.
So it behooves the dungeon master to make sure that they're providing a scenario that is not undoable or unable to be done by the players, because then it's just like a landslide victory that, all right, you TPK'd the party. Well done.
Well, I mean, in that instance, I think if we walked into a room, there was something flying 60 feet above us that we could barely target, and he was just blasting us. He has us at advantage at range, and if we couldn't get into close combat with him, I think we would all say, yeah, we should probably just leave.
Yes, true.
Not after 3 people are down.
Well, it doesn't make for an interesting encounter. But so when I always look for like at least one or two interesting features to add to any dungeon I create. Mm-hmm. And hopefully at least one of them is not a combat. For instance, I would say I did the Dragonborn Underground City. one of the cool things was the flooded lake that was, I believe, in the Colosseum. It wasn't actually a natural feature of the city. It was just something that incorporated parts of the city and something that happened, right? So it was this flooded lake, and it just became an interesting thing for a background piece until one of the players decided to try and go in it. Right, and then there was some crazy like
Quick Quipper Swarm, right?
yeah, some kind of like piranha in there or whatever. And then the other thing that was kind of cool to do was the library. There was there was the underground library that you guys needed to get information from, and then I also did like a puzzle trap room, where well, I shouldn't say room, it was rooms. It was literally like, I believe, a 5 rooms off of a chamber, and they had to like solve these riddles for each room or puzzles. And when they didn't, it would keep adding monsters to the room, as well as damaging them with different energy types, and until they solved it. And then I believe it was a trap, right? Isn't that what it was? Yeah. So it was basically a 6-room trap that you had to use all the rooms and all the pieces, and figure it out, and then execute the plan in order to get out of it.
Right.
Yeah. So a dungeon feature that I like to add, along with the puzzles and things, is a kind of just like a little quirk to it, and that is if either it's a thing that a description and some kind of task or something that goes along either with the original express purpose of what the dungeon was, or what the current occupants are doing. So kind of either give it that lived-in feel, like maybe there's some food in a bag someplace or a satchel, or maybe there is some hunting equipment, or cold weather gear or something. Whatever makes you say, oh, someone's recently used this because it's winter outside and this has got ice still on it, or something, along those lines. That it's kind of, there's a lived-in feel, there's something around the area, or something that speaks to its original purpose. Like, let's say we've got this little model here, and there's these 4 white orbs. So just thinking about it, I was like, well, back in the day, 500 years ago,
Just us.
oh, they look like orbs to me. So let's say they're orbs.
Okay.
So if they're
They're
white,
orbs.
and let's say they're white orbs, and if you put some kind of magic spell in it like light, they'll light up for an extended period of time. Well, if you light all 4 of them, maybe it unlocks something on the altar that has nothing to do with the current quest, but maybe there's like a ceremonial dagger and some money in it. Just like something that they kind of fiddled around with their environment. They listened to what I'm actually saying in the descriptions, and I just add little quirky things to it. Now, I've added little quirky things to dungeons before. The characters have gone and run with it, and they actually use the quirky things I put in to solve other parts of the quest, either maybe because they thought the other's supposed to, or they just like said, oh, well, we've got this thing we found. And it adds a little bit element, it adds a little bit of creativity on their part to figuring out, is this is this needed right now, or can we just mess with this, or is this a distraction? And just kind of, it's not throwaway description, but just like little extra bits that I can come up with something on the fly to say, well, if they keep messing with this, I'll give them something to interact with.
I think what they have to do is cast light in its mouth, and then once they all light up, they shoot the light eye beams at the bat at the far end. Or is it a bat or a dragon or something? It's a bat. It's a bat sigil, right? It's got looks like a little gem or something in there, right? They all hit that. It reflects it back at the altar, and that's when the thing rises out of the altar.
Oh, there you go. That could also be that.
Could be treasure, or not.
It
The best traps, like when you look at modules and adventures like Tomb of Horrors, are the ones where the players have to work really hard to like screw themselves.
Yeah, so it could either summon a shadow being, bat monster thing, or it could summon an oracle that the ancient people, dwellers of the temple, revered and talked to and asked questions of.
Yes.
And it's just randomly in this place. Yeah, currently, human bandits are using this as a hideout, but that's not the original purpose of this place.
Right, it gives them a chance to discover something that even the bandits didn't know about. And then maybe they can ask those questions either to lead them to another quest, make this quest easier, or it's just kind of like a fun role-playing distraction that gets inserted into
what would normally be a combat thing.
Yeah, yes. and that makes it feel, that delineates the dungeon and gives them more of that feeling that it's kind of like a mini sandbox that they're playing in with what they decide to do and what they decide to pay attention to.
Well, also I like too. The things you're talking about is actually taking that concept of a dungeon and connect it into the wider world, saying that no, this isn't just a self-contained place. It connects to the other world too. Whether it's someone is using this winter gear so they don't freeze when they leave here, or here's this hunting stuff because while they may be living in this thing that we're quote unquote calling a dungeon, they still need to eat and they go out and they get the food.
So another thing to take into consideration is, all right, whoever is in charge of this place, how long have they been here? If they created it or if they've been here long enough, what have they done to kind of make it their own? Again, going back to the example I had with the beholder, I had said that all of the passageways were completely circular, so there wasn't like a square flat surface for anyone to walk on. And if for those that weren't actually riding, it was actually a little bit uncomfortable. There was no mechanical issues to deal with, but it kind of spoke to that beholder mindset that things that are spherical or circular are closer to perfection.
They're better.
They're better because that's the way beholders see things.
Yeah, and I would speak to that as well. Is like when you did that, even the pedestals that it kept its trinkets on were round. The trinkets that were on those pedestals were round. Like everything was round. I think even the books were like spheres.
Yes, I actually created orbs that had the books in them, like as more like an audiobook kind of situation,
Or an illusion or something like that. Like in every sense of the way, like you just knew that this beholder was obsessed with things that were spherical.
Mm-hmm.
And everything should be spherical.
So like there were items that were clearly more valuable or more powerful that were
Cast
just tossed in a
aside.
pile, but the stuff that was round and spherical or eye related were the ones that were put on these pedestals and kept in positions of reverence, I guess you could say.
Which is also another cool concept if you guys are paying attention, is to add these quirks, right? And what Ted did is added this quirk where literally something that was better and more powerful was literally thrown into a rubbish pile because it just didn't fit the quirk for this particular monster. And you can do that too. Like you can design your dungeon by looking at like who's the big bad, right? I like to do it by the theme, and then I match my theme to whatever the end boss is going to be per se. But another thing you could do is pick your end boss and then match everything to that.
Well,
There's a lot of different ways to get there.
Based on the story that happened set up to this, I had picked this because it's like, oh, this would be a cool encounter for the party to get to at some point in time. So then I had to work backwards from there. Where sometimes it's like, okay, you're going to a place. Well, what am I going to put in that place? So you can do it from either direction. So what do you guys think? What tools and tricks of the trade do you use when you're creating your dungeons? There's a great place to do that, and that's down in the comments below. While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Don't forget to check out our awesome sponsor, ArmorClass10.com. In the description below, you find the link.
You also read articles over at Nerdarchy.com.
So until next time, stay nerdy.